Episode 4. The Door is Elsewhere. Nell Harrow. We left just before 11. That was later than I wanted and earlier than Elise was prepared for, which meant it was probably the right time. The hotel had settled into that false daytime normality places like that do so well. Breakfast trays cleared. Hoover somewhere on the first floor. A tradesman in reception pretending not to notice the smell that still came and went in patches near the back corridor. 2 guests checking out with the brittle cheerfulness of people who had slept badly and wanted to blame the mattress. Elise stood behind the desk finishing an email she had already rewritten twice. I waited by the door with my coat on and the ledger in my bag. She looked up at me once, saw I was not moving, and looked back at the screen. You know staring at me won't make this better. I'm not trying to make it better. That much is obvious. I said nothing. She hit send harder than necessary, picked up her keys, then turned to the agency girl covering reception. If anyone asks, I'm at the supplier unit about the linen issue. The girl nodded too quickly. People will accept almost any lie if it sounds administrative enough. Outside, the air had that flat, pale quality March does so well. Not cold enough for drama, not warm enough for comfort. The sky over Peterborough looked rubbed out. The car park was wet from earlier rain, and the puddles held a colourless version of the hotel sign. Elise unlocked the car. I stopped. What? I'm driving. She frowned. Why? Because if we get halfway there and you change your mind, I'd rather not die in a hedge. I am not going to drive us into a hedge. No, you're going to think about it very hard near a roundabout. She gave me a long look. Then, to my surprise, she handed me the keys. That worried me more than if she had argued. We got in. I put the bag with the ledger at my feet. Elise folded her arms and stared straight ahead while I started the engine. For the first 5 minutes, neither of us spoke. That was normal enough. We had always been good at silence, not the healthy kind, not the companionable kind people brag about when they've been married too long. Ours was a family silence, functional, defensive, full of things stacked neatly behind the eyes. The road out felt ordinary in the way roads do when you are heading somewhere you do not want to go. Retail units, a hand car wash, a pharmacy, a row of tired semis with satellite dishes tilted like listening devices, a bus pulling out badly, someone in a white van taking a corner as if physics were optional. I kept my eyes on the road. Elise kept hers on the window. After a while, she said, I still think this is a mistake. Yes. That isn't agreement. No, it's recognition. She let out a breath through her nose. I mean it, Nell. We could be walking into a house full of mold and old paperwork because a dead message on a hotel window told us to. Not just that. No, sorry. You're right. Also because Nan left us a cheerful little family manual about witness threshold and debt collection. That's closer. She turned and looked at me then. You hear how mad this sounds? All the time. And that doesn't bother you? It bothers me constantly. It just doesn't alter the facts. She looked away again. We passed the turn for the retail park, then the older road, then the stretch lined with bare trees and low fencing where the town thins out and memory starts getting ideas above its station. I knew where we were going without needing the sat-nav. That annoyed me. Some places stay in the body long after you have stopped calling them home. Not because you miss them, because your nervous system kept the map, left at the lights, straight over the mini roundabout, past the off-license that had changed name 3 times but never improved. The parade of shops with one shutter always half down, the dentist with the faded blue sign, then the estate. Elise shifted in her seat. I felt it too. Not supernatural. Not yet. Just the old pressure of return. Streets narrowing, houses getting smaller, front gardens trimmed into apology, wheelie bins tucked beside gates, net curtains, pebble dash. The architecture of people who do not waste words and do not throw anything away. Our mother's road sat at the far end of the estate in a shallow bend, as if even the planners had not been especially interested in it. I slowed. Neither of us spoke. The house looked exactly as I had hoped it wouldn't. Smaller, for one thing. They always do. Childhood enlarges everything unpleasant out of self-defense. But it was also more intact than I wanted. The same narrow front path, the same low wall with the cracked capstone, the same bay window with the stiff cream curtains, the same side gate hanging slightly off true. Someone had painted the front door since Mum died. Dark green now instead of the old gloss brown. It did not help. I pulled over 2 houses down. Elise did not unbuckle her seatbelt. For a moment I thought she might actually refuse. Just sit there, arms folded, jaw set, and make me choose between dragging her bodily across a suburban pavement or going in alone. Then she said, "I used to hate that window." "Which one?" "The little one above the side passage." I looked. Small frosted pane. Bathroom, if memory served. "Why?" "Because at night it always looked lit, even when it wasn't." I nodded once. That tracked. The house had always done that. Held light where there should not have been any. Swallowed sound where there should have been plenty. Elise finally unclipped her seatbelt. Neither of us moved. Then she said, "Do you still have the key?" I reached into my coat pocket and held it up. Her face changed. "Why do you have that?" "Because no one asked for it." That is not an answer. It's the only one available. When Mum died, there had been forms, phone calls, casseroles from women who had disliked her on principle but admired her standards, and the long bureaucratic insult of sorting a life into categories. Useful, sentimental, rubbish, keep, donate, sign here. Somewhere in the middle of that, I had put the spare key in my pocket and never mentioned it again. Not out of sentiment, not entirely. Elise looked at the key for another second, then opened her door. The air outside smelled of damp brick, cut hedge, and distant fryer oil from somewhere on the estate. Ordinary. Flat. Almost enough to make the rest feel unreasonable. We walked to the house without speaking. The closer I got, the more I noticed the details I had forgotten I remembered. The hairline crack in the second paving slab. The rust stain beneath the letterbox. The way the front step dipped slightly on the left where years of feet had worn it down. I stopped at the door. Elise stood half a pace behind me. "Any sudden visions?" she said. "Not yet. Helpful." I put the key in the lock. It stuck for a second, then turned. That was worse than if it had refused. The door opened inward with a soft drag at the bottom catching on the same patch of carpet it had always caught on. The smell hit first. Closed-up house, dust, old fabric, stale wood, a trace of furniture polish that had no right to still be there. And beneath it, something colder. Not rot, not damp exactly. Just the smell of air kept too long away from daylight. We stood on the threshold like burglars with a moral objection. The hallway was dim, narrow, familiar in the way a scar is familiar. Coat hooks on the left. Small table under the mirror. The ugly brass umbrella stand Mum had insisted was perfectly good. Stairs rising ahead. Living room door to the right. Dining room beyond. And at the far back of the house, out of sight but not out of mind, the little sitting room. I heard Elise breathe in. Then stop. "What?" I said quietly. She didn't answer straight away. Then, "It still feels the same." I knew what she meant. Not haunted. Not yet. Just arranged around a pressure point, as if the house had spent years pretending to be a normal house and resented being asked to continue. I stepped inside. The floorboard by the radiator gave its old complaint. Elise shut the door behind us, and the sound of the latch settling made something in my chest tighten hard enough to count. No one spoke. No one needed to. The silence in that house was never empty. It had texture, layers, the sort of silence that seemed to have been listening before you arrived. I took one step further into the hall, then another. The mirror above the little table caught us both and gave us back badly. Me pale and narrow in the face. Elise drawn tight with dread. For a second, with the light coming in weakly from the frosted glass, we looked less like sisters returning home and more like women arriving to identify a body. Elise saw it too. God, she muttered. Yes. I set my bag down carefully by the stairs. Don't do that, she said at once. What? Put things down like we're staying. We're not staying. Good. I looked towards the back of the house. The dining room door stood half open. Beyond it, just visible, the edge of the old sideboard. The wallpaper had been stripped at some point before Mum died and never redone properly. Bare lining paper showed in one panel. That felt exactly like her. Start a job. Refused to finish it because the principle mattered more than the result. Elise, I said, still looking ahead. When you heard the knocking, where were you? She swallowed. Usually upstairs. In bed? Sometimes. Sometimes on the landing. Did Mum ever mention it? No. Did you? A pause. Once? I turned to look at her. She was staring past me, not at me, eyes fixed on the back of the house. What happened? She said old pipes knock in threes if air gets trapped. That sounds like her. Yes. Did you believe her? No. Did you pretend to? Yes. That sounded like us. I picked up the bag again. Elise noticed. Why are you taking that with you? Because if the ledger starts moving in this house, I want it where I can see it. That is one of the worst things you've ever said casually. Possibly. We moved down the hallway together. The living room on the right was exactly as I remembered, and somehow more offensive for it. The floral sofa with the wooden arms, the gas fire with the fake coals, the cabinet of ornaments nobody liked enough to dust properly. A room designed for sitting upright and not saying what you meant. I did not stop. Neither did Elise. At the end of the hall, the kitchen opened to the left. Beyond that, the back door and the small square of garden Mum had always referred to as more than enough if you know what you're doing. Straight ahead, beyond the dining room, was the short passage to the little sitting room. The air changed there. Only slightly. Cooler, stiller, but enough. Elise grabbed my sleeve. Nell, I know. No, I mean, she pointed. At first I saw nothing. Then I saw that the passage door, the one leading to the little back room, was not shut. It was open by an inch, just enough to show darkness beyond. We both stood still. I thought you said she kept it locked, I said. She did. You're sure? Yes. I walked forward one step. The door did not move. Another. Still nothing. The gap stayed where it was, black and narrow and deliberate. Elise's voice came thin behind me. It wasn't open when we came in. I did not answer because I did not know if that was true. Memory is unreliable in frightened people. Unfortunately, frightened people are often the only witnesses available. I stopped just short of the passage. The air there smelled different. Not dust, not closed-up fabric, something older. Paper. Damp wood. A faint mineral cold that touched the back of the throat. I set the bag down quietly and reached for the passage light switch on the wall. Pressed it. Nothing. Bulb's gone, Elise whispered. Or the power's off. Or something else. Yes. I took out my phone and turned on the torch. The beam cut a clean white strip through the dim hall and landed on the door at the end of the short passage. Painted cream once, yellowed now, brass handle, scrape marks near the bottom edge, and, just above the latch, 4 shallow lines in the wood. Not random, not where. Marks, as if someone had tried to count and stopped at 4. Elise saw them and made a small sound. I've never seen those before. I believed that too. The house did not show everything at once. It never had. I moved the light lower. At the base of the door where it met the carpet, there was a thin, dark line. Not shadow. Gap. The room beyond was colder than the hall. I could feel it. Not imagination. Not nerves. Physical cold, leaking under the door in a steady thread. Behind me, Elise said, Nell, I don't like this. No, I mean it. So do I. I stepped into the passage. The floorboard beneath my left foot gave a soft creak. Then, from the other side of the door, something answered. One knock, not loud, not violent, just certain. Elise grabbed the back of my coat. I did not move. The house held itself still around us. Then came the second knock. The second knock landed softer than the first. That made it worse. There is something about restraint that unsettles people more than force. If a thing throws itself at a door, your body knows what to do with that. Adrenaline, distance, panic if necessary. But a measured knock, patient, deliberate, almost polite, suggests rules, intention, memory. Elise's hand tightened on the back of my coat. Nell. I kept my eyes on the door. I know. No, I mean, don't. The third knock came. Not loud, not angry, certain. The sound went through me like cold water. Behind me, Elise made a noise I had not heard from her since she was a child. Not a scream, not even a gasp, just the involuntary sound a body makes when an old fear turns out to have been right all along. Then the brass handle moved, not quickly, not with force. Just a slow, clean turn downward, as if someone on the other side had heard the third knock answered by our silence and decided to try manners instead. I stepped back at once and put an arm out across Elise without looking at her. The handle stopped halfway, held there, then returned very gently to its starting place. No rattle, no shove, no melodrama, just a pause. And then, from the other side of the door, a woman's voice said, "You took your time." Everything in me locked. Not because it was loud, not because it was ghostly, because I knew the voice. Not perfectly, not enough to claim certainty in court, but enough in the body, enough in the spine. Elise whispered, "No." I did not answer. The voice came again, still through the wood, still calm. "If you're both here, open it properly. Standing in the passage like burglars is insulting." Elise's fingers dug into my sleeve. "That's her." "Yes." "No, Nell. That's her." Our mother had been dead for 3 years. That fact did not stop mattering just because her voice was on the other side of a locked door. If anything, it mattered more. The dead in my world do not return whole. Not like this. Not with tone intact. Not with irritation. Not with the exact clipped impatience of a woman who believed emotion was what happened to other people. I said to the door, "You're not her." A beat. Then, "That depends how strict you're being." The air in the passage dropped another degree. My torchlight shook once across the paintwork and steadied. Elise said, "Don't talk to it." "I'm already talking to it." "Stop." The voice beyond the door gave a short sigh. "Honestly, both of you, I leave instructions, I leave warnings, I leave an entire house arranged around the problem, and still I get this." That was worse than if it had threatened us, because it sounded like her. Not loving, not warm, not cruel for the sake of it, just brisk, tired, and faintly offended by incompetence. I felt for the key in my pocket before I remembered there wasn't one. The little sitting room had always been locked from Mum's side, never ours. She kept the key, probably on her, probably hidden, probably both. "Elise," I said quietly, "when you heard her come down here at night, did you ever hear the key?" "What?" "The lock." Maybe. I don't know." That was fair. Children hear fear first and detail second. The voice said, "Left drawer of the hall table, back corner, blue thread tied through the bow. If you're going to do this badly, at least do it efficiently." Neither of us moved. Then Elise said, almost angrily, "Don't." "I wasn't going to." "You were thinking about it." "Yes. That counts." I kept the torch on the door and backed slowly out of the passage. The hall felt warmer by comparison, though only just. The mirror above the little table caught the light and threw it back in a thin, weak stripe. I crouched, opened the top drawer, and moved aside old elastic bands, takeaway menus, a dead pen, 2 church raffle books, and a single birthday candle wrapped in tissue. At the back corner, Exactly where the voice had said was a small key with blue thread tied through the bow. I stared at it. Elise said, "No." "Yes." "No. Absolutely not. That is exactly how people die in stories." "We're not in a story." She gave me a look. "Fine. Worse. We're in your life." I picked up the key. It was cold enough to sting. Not house cold, not metal cold, river cold, deep place cold. And for 1 second, as my fingers closed around it, I saw something I had not asked to see. Not a vision exactly. More like memory forced through the wrong skull. Our mother standing in the hall in her nightdress and cardigan, hair pinned badly, one hand on this same key. Not frightened, focused, listening toward the back room with the face she used when dealing with salesmen, vicars, or anyone else she expected to disappoint. Then her voice. Not through the door now, but in my ear, close and hard. "If it knocks 3 times, you do not answer with your hand." The image went. I was back in the hall, knees complaining, key in my palm. Elise had gone white. "What?" I stood up too quickly. She knew the rule. "Who?" "Mum." Elise laughed once, sharp and humorless. "Well, that's comforting. Lovely to know she had a rule book and still left us with none of it." I looked at the key. She didn't leave us none of it. "No," Elise said, "she left us all of it. That's the problem." The voice from the back room called, "If you're done arguing, I would prefer not to spend the afternoon behind a door in my own house." Elise flinched. I said louder now, "If you're not her, what are you?" The answer came at once. What she left. That shut the house up. Even the little ambient sounds old houses make, the settling, the distant tick, the soft complaint of pipes, seemed to step back from it. What she left, not what she was, not who she had become. What she left. I looked at Elise. She looked as if she might be sick. "Do we open it?" I said. "No. That wasn't really for you." "I know. It's still no." "Fair." I walked back to the passage. Slower this time. Not from fear. From attention. The door at the end waited in the torch beam, unchanged, which was somehow offensive. The 4 shallow marks above the latch looked darker now. I held the key up. Blue thread. Brass worn smooth at the edge. Old, domestic, ordinary. Nothing ordinary has any business feeling like that in the hand. "Elise," I said, without turning, "if this goes wrong..." "When?" she said. "When. If it goes wrong, you do not touch the handle. Fine. You do not answer if it speaks to you from inside the room." She didn't reply. "Elise." "Fine. And if I tell you to leave, you leave?" That got a short, incredulous laugh. "You really think I'm the one likely to do something stupid here?" "Yes." That almost helped. Almost. I put the key in the lock. It fitted too easily. Of course it did. For a second, I just held it there, feeling the metal bite cold through my fingers. Then I turned it. The lock gave with a heavy internal click. Not the cheap snap of a normal latch. Something older, more final. Elise swore under her breath. I put my hand on the handle. It was warmer than the key. That was new. I pushed the door open. Only a few inches at first. The smell came out immediately. Dust, yes. Old paper, yes. But under that, candle wax, cold ash, lavender gone dry with age, and something mineral and wet that did not belong in a sealed room. I opened it wider and lifted the torch. The little sitting room was smaller than memory and worse than imagination. No windows open, curtains half drawn, a narrow sofa against one wall with a sheet over it, small round table in the middle, bookcase at the far side, standard lamp, coal scuttle by a dead fireplace. Nothing dramatic, nothing occult laid out for effect, no circles on the floor, no blood, no nonsense, just a room someone had used carefully and hidden thoroughly. And on the table in the centre was a second ledger. Elise said behind me, "Oh, for God's sake!" I almost laughed. Almost. The room was cold enough that my breath showed. I stepped inside. The floor gave a low complaint under my weight, then settled. The torch beam moved across the walls. Shelves, files, 3 labelled archive boxes, a framed photograph turned face down, a small brass bowl full of keys, a church candle burned down to the base, a glass of water half evaporated, dust settled thick across the top, not abandoned, paused, like she had left in the middle of something and expected to come back. "Elise," I said quietly, "don't cross the threshold yet." That word landed between us. She stayed where she was. Good. I moved closer to the table. The second ledger was black, not brown. Newer, less damaged. No title on the cover. Beside it sat a stack of folded papers tied with string, and on top of them, a single envelope. My name was written on the front. Not Nell, Eleanor. I stopped dead. There are few things more unsettling than being expected by the dead in your own childhood home. Elise? I can see that. Her voice had gone thin again. Is that her handwriting? Yes. No hesitation. No doubt. I reached for the envelope. The paper was brittle but dry. The seal had never been stuck down properly. Typical. Even her secrets had been filed for later amendment. I opened it. Inside was one sheet of lined paper folded once. I read the first line and wished I hadn't. If you are reading this, then either I am dead or your grandmother has failed, and I do not know which possibility irritates me more. Elise made a strangled sound that was half laugh, half grief. That's her. Yes. I kept reading. Do not let Elise answer anything that knocks 3 times. Do not bring the first ledger into this room unless the account has already turned. If the mark appears on your hand, burn the blue file before nightfall. If the room is colder than the hall, then it is already open. I stopped. The torchlight had begun to shake in my hand. Elise said, "What?" I looked up at her. "It's already open." The room answered that sentence with a soft sound from somewhere near the fireplace. Not a bang, not a scrape. A drip. One clear drop of water hitting stone. Then another. I turned the torch. The fireplace was empty, but the back wall of it, blackened brick, old soot, rusted grate hooks, was wet. Not damp. Wet. A dark patch spreading slowly from the centre outward, as if water were pushing through from the other side. Elise whispered, "Nell." I took one step back from the table. The second ledger shifted. Not much, just enough for the cover to lift and fall. The first ledger, still in my bag in the hall, answered. I heard it. A muffled thud from outside the room, as if something bound in leather had knocked once against the skirting board from inside the bag. One knock in here, one knock out there, call and response. The air pressure changed. That is the only phrase I have for it. The room seemed to deepen without getting larger, the corners pulling away, the cold finding our ankles first, then climbing. Elise said, "I think I'm going to be sick. Stay where you are." I hate when you say that. I know. The wet patch in the fireplace widened. Water began to thread down between the bricks in thin black lines. And then, in the dark mouth of the grate, something moved. Not a whole figure. Not yet, just the suggestion of a hand pressing once against the inside surface from somewhere impossible, as if there was space behind the brick and someone had put their palm to it. 5 long marks of pressure, then gone. Elise made a sound behind me and stumbled back into the hall. Good, sensible, late but sensible. I kept my eyes on the fireplace. The letter in my hand crackled. There was more on the page. I forced myself to look down and read the final line. When it asks to be let through, it will use my voice first. The woman behind the door was not our mother. Not exactly. It was the shape our mother had used to keep something managed. The room had never been locked to keep us out. It had been locked to keep something in. Behind me from the hall, Elise said in a shaking voice, "Nell." I turned. She was staring not at me, but at the wall beside the passage, at the mirror. In the glass, over my shoulder, reflected from inside the little sitting room, there was someone else standing by the fireplace. A woman in a cardigan, hair pinned badly, face turned slightly down, as if reading. Our mother, or what had learned her outline. And as I watched, the reflection lifted its head and looked straight at Elise. Then it smiled. Elise made a sound like someone trying not to scream in church. I turned back to the room. Nothing by the fireplace. Only the wet brick, the black mouth of the grate, the second ledger on the table with its cover lying still, as if it had never moved at all. Then I looked at the mirror in the hall. She was still there, not in the room, in the reflection. Standing just behind where I had been, one hand resting lightly on the back of the little chair by the fireplace, head tilted in that familiar way our mother had when she was deciding whether someone was being foolish or merely disappointing. The cardigan was grey, the skirt dark, hair pinned up badly, as ever. Face pale, lined, exact, and smiling. Not warmly, not cruelly either. Worse than both, patiently. "Elise," I said and kept my voice as level as I could, "don't look at her." "I already am." "I know. Stop." "I can't." That was the problem with certain kinds of fear. Once it catches the eye, the body treats looking away as surrender. I stepped backwards out of the room, never taking my eyes off the mirror. The reflected woman watched me do it, not moving, not blinking, just tracking. When I reached the hall, I put myself between Elise and the glass. That broke the line of sight. The pressure in the air eased by a fraction. Elise grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt. "That's her." "No. That is her face." "Yes." She was shaking, not dramatically. Fine tremors in the hand, jaw locked, breath too high in the chest. The sort of fear that comes from recognition, not surprise. I kept my body angled so the mirror stayed blocked. "Listen to me. If it wanted to frighten us, it would do more than stand there. This is for control." "Lovely. Great. I feel much better knowing I'm being managed," I almost answered. Then the woman in the mirror spoke. Not loudly, not from the room, from the glass itself, as if the sound had learned how reflection worked. "Elise," she said with our mother's voice, "don't be rude. I've been waiting." Elise folded in on herself for a second, one hand over her mouth. I said to the mirror, "You don't get to use her." The reflected face turned to me. "I don't get to. Eleanor, your whole life has been built on using what the dead leave behind." That landed because it had enough truth in it to bruise. I said nothing. The smile sharpened just slightly. "There's the problem," it said. "You always did mistake function for virtue." That was our mother too. Or close enough. She had a talent for saying the worst thing in the tidiest possible sentence. "Elise," I said quietly, "go to the front door." She stared at me. "What?" "Go. I'm not leaving you in here with—" "Go to the front door." Something in my face must have convinced her. She backed away down the hall, not turning her back on the mirror until the last possible second. Good. I kept myself between the glass and the room. The reflected woman watched Elise go, then looked back at me with unmistakable irritation. She was always the easier one to call. That turned my blood cold. "Call?" "Yes." The reflected figure lifted one hand and touched the side of her own throat, almost absently. "Doors are not built from wood, Eleanor. They're built from response." I said nothing, not because I had no answer, because I had too many and none of them were useful. Behind me, from the little sitting room, came another drip from the fireplace. Then another. The mirror woman went on. "Your grandmother understood that. Your mother understood it eventually. You, unfortunately, insist on understanding everything in the wrong order." "What are you?" The smile thinned. "A question asked too late." I hate answers like that. The dead love them. They think obscurity is depth. Usually it isn't. Usually it's vanity with good posture. I shifted my grip on the torch and said, "If you were powerful, you wouldn't need a dead woman's face." That got the first real reaction. Not anger, annoyance. A tiny flattening of the mouth, a stillness around the eyes. Useful. "Power," it said, "is for men who want witnesses. I prefer access." Then the temperature in the hall dropped again. Not all at once. In a steady draw, as if warmth were being pulled under the little sitting room door and fed to something waiting behind the wall. From the front of the house, Elise called, "Nell?" "What?" "There's someone outside." Of course there was. I backed down the hall toward her, keeping one eye on the mirror until the angle broke and the reflected figure disappeared. The moment it vanished, the house felt larger and emptier and more dangerous for it. Elise stood by the frosted glass of the front door, not touching it. "What do you mean, someone?" She pointed. Through the patterned glass, blurred by the old texture, I could make out a figure on the step. Still. Upright. Waiting. Not knocking, just there. I moved closer. The outline was wrong for a neighbour. Too still, too patient. Hat or hood, maybe. Long coat, hands low at the sides. Then the letter in my hand crackled again. I looked down. There was more writing on the page. Not ink appearing from nowhere, not theatrics, just lines I had somehow not seen before, as if the angle of light had changed enough to reveal them. I read, "If one waits at the front door while the room is open, do not invite him in. He is not the first. He is what comes after." Elise said, "What does it say?" "Nothing helpful." "Nell, don't open the door." I wasn't planning to. Good. The figure outside remained motionless. Then, very slowly, it raised one hand and touched the glass. Not a knock, just a hand laid flat against the frosted pane. Long fingers, dark sleeve, water beading briefly where the palm met the glass. Elise stepped back. I did too. The shape on the other side of the door leaned in slightly, enough that the head came closer to the pane. Not enough to show a face, just intent. Then it spoke. The front door swallowed most of the sound, but not all. "Witness," it said. "Not to both of us, to me." Elise whispered, "That's not one of the sailors." "No." "How do you know?" "Because they announce themselves like Labour. This doesn't." That was the best I could do in the moment, but it was true. The sailors had weight, history, purpose. This felt cleaner, worse, less like the dead and more like administration. The thing at the door said, "You have opened the room." I did not answer. "You have brought the first account into the second." My bag and the ledger, damn it. I should have left it in the car. I knew that. The moment had simply arrived too fast and with too many other problems attached. Elise looked at me. "What does that mean?" "It means I made a mistake." "Excellent. Nice to have that confirmed." The voice outside went on, calm as a clerk. "What is carried may now be balanced." Then, from the back of the house, the woman in the mirror called out in our mother's voice, "Don't listen to him. He only comes when the sums are nearly done." The front door figure did not move. Interesting. Conflict. Not safety. Never mistake conflict for safety. But useful, I said, loudly enough for both ends of the house to hear. "You seem very interested in telling me what not to do." The mirror voice answered first. "Because your family has a talent for making simple things catastrophic." Then the figure at the door said, "Because she would keep it open." She, not it. Not the room. The shape in our mother's outline. I felt the pattern shift a fraction. Not enough to understand fully. Enough to know there were sides here, or at least competing uses. "Elise," I said quietly. "Front room. Now." "What? Why?" "Because I need you out of the line between the two of them." She looked from the door to me to the hall behind us. I hate every part of this sentence. "I know, go." This time she went. I waited until I heard the living room door open, then half close. Good enough. I stood alone in the hall with the front door figure on one side of the house and the open room on the other. That felt familiar in a way I did not enjoy. I said to the door, "If I don't invite you in, what happens?" A pause. Then, "The threshold weakens elsewhere." I closed my eyes for 1 second. Elise. Of course. Threshold was not poetic. It was functional. It meant the line could be made through her, with or without her consent, if the room stayed open long enough. I turned toward the back of the house. The little sitting room waited in dimness. The passage beyond it colder now, faint vapour threading low along the skirting board, like breath dragged close to the floor. The mirror voice said, softer now, almost conversational. She was always easier to open than you, softer in the hinge. I moved before I had fully decided to. Back down the hall, past the table into the passage, torch beam cutting white across the doorframe. The room beyond seemed deeper than it had any right to be, the far wall of the fireplace darker now, wet brick, shining. On the table beside the second ledger sat a blue file. It had not been there before. Of that I was certain. Standard office file. Cheap card. Blue gone grey at the edges. A handwritten label on the tab. E. Omant / first responses. My stomach turned. I heard Elise behind me before I saw her. I told you not to leave me. I told you to stay in the front room. Yes, well, we're both disappointed. Her voice shook, but she was there. That counted. She saw the file. Oh no. Yes. That is my name. Yes. I can read, Nell. I picked up the file. It was dry, room temperature, ordinary. That was almost worse. Inside were papers, notes, dates, short observations in our mother's handwriting. Age 7, heard knocking before storm. Did not answer. Age 9, spoke to corridor corner as if spoken to first. Age 11, fever after contact with mirror in back room. Age 14, almost answered third knock. Prevented. Age 14, do not leave her alone when house is active. Elise made a strangled noise beside me. She kept records on me. Yes, she kept records on me. Yes. Not because I lacked imagination, because repetition was the only thing holding her upright. I turned the page. There was a second section. Not observations, instructions. If threshold response increases, reduce mirrors. Do not allow direct invitation language. Keep bedroom door latched after midnight. If she begins answering in sleep, move her bed from the north wall. If she asks who is in the sitting room, say no one. Elise took the file out of my hand and stared at it like she might tear it in half. She knew. Yes. She knew all of it. Yes. And she said nothing. That was the wound under the wound, wasn't it? Not the haunting, not the inheritance, the management, the years of being handled by people who called it protection and never once asked permission. I said, "There's more." She gave me a look that could have stripped paint. Marvellous. I took the next page. This one was about me. Of course it was. N. Omant / witness traits. Age 8. Names the dead without introduction. Age 10. Identifies man at roadside from no prior meeting. Age 12. Records details accurately after event. Do not let her think accuracy is safety. She will mistake distance for control if allowed. I stopped there. Elise said very quietly, "That sounds like you." Yes. It sounds like she knew you better than you think. No, I said. It sounds like she studied me. The room approved of that sentence somehow. The cold shifted. The wet patch in the fireplace spread another inch. Then the woman's voice came again, no longer from the mirror now, but from inside the room itself. Closer, nearer the fireplace. I did what was required. The words landed in our mother's tone, but stripped of her usual irritation. Flat. Almost formal. Elise turned toward the grate. No, she said. And for the first time there was real fury in it, stronger than fear. No, you don't get that. You don't get to call this required. The room went still. Even the dripping paused. Good, I thought. Anger was better than obedience. Elise took one step into the room before I could stop her. The temperature dropped so fast my ears hurt. The second ledger on the table snapped open. Pages turned by themselves in a hard, dry rush. And from the fireplace, from behind the wet black brick, something knocked back. Not 3 times. Once, then once again from somewhere deeper in the wall. And then, underneath both of those from the hall where my bag lay with the first ledger inside it, came the answering third knock. The house had completed the pattern. Elise froze. Too late. The woman's voice said with terrible satisfaction, "There you are!" And the blue file in Elise's hands began to bleed water through the paper. The first thing I noticed was that Elise stopped blinking. Not froze, not fainted, stopped blinking. The blue file hung in her hands, water pushing through the paper in dark, spreading veins, and she stood there with her eyes fixed on the fireplace, as if something on the other side of the brick had finally said her name properly. "Elise!" No response. I moved at once and took hold of her wrist. Cold. Not skin cold. Not shock cold. The same river-deep cold I had felt in the key, only now it was in her pulse. "Elise." Her head turned toward me, slowly, too smoothly. That frightened me more than if she had convulsed or screamed. Bodies under strain are meant to look strained. This looked aligned. Her mouth opened. When she spoke, the voice was hers. The rhythm was not. "Still there," she said, as if reporting on weather. "That's better." I let go of her wrist and stepped back. The blue file dropped from her hands to the carpet with a wet slap. "Elise," I said, keeping my own voice level by force. "Look at me." She did. Instantly. Too instantly. Her pupils were wide enough to swallow most of the colour in her eyes. Her face had gone oddly blank, not expressionless exactly, but emptied of the little tensions that make a person themselves. No worry line between the brows. No jaw set. No defensive humour waiting at the corner of the mouth. Just openness. Threshold. I hated the word now. From the front of the house, the figure at the door spoke again, voice muffled by distance and wood. "It begins." The thing in our mother's shape answered from the room. "You are early." "I am exact." That exchange told me more than either of them intended. Not allies, not enemies. Functions, timings, rules. The room had opened enough for one process. The thing at the door belonged to another. "Elise," I said again, sharper now, "step back into the hall." She smiled at me. Not like herself, not like our mother either. This was worse, softer, curious. "I can hear it now," she said. "What?" "The other side." Every muscle in my back tightened. The wet in the fireplace had spread across most of the rear brick now, black and glistening. Water threaded down into the ashpan and dripped steadily onto the hearthstone. The smell in the room had changed, too. Less dust, more river, more old metal. More of that impossible deep place air, like something sealed underwater had found a crack and was using it. I bent, snatched up the blue file and shoved it under my arm. The paper was soaking through fast, ink already feathering. If the letter was right, I had to burn it before nightfall. That assumed we got it before nightfall. "Elise." She turned her head slightly, listening to something I could not hear. Then she said, almost gently, "Don't interrupt." I slapped her, not hard enough to injure, hard enough to offend. The sound cracked through the room. For 1 second, her face changed. Shock. Anger. Herself. Then the cold surged back through her expression and flattened it again. "That was rude," she said. "Good. Better." Irritation meant friction. Friction meant she was still in there somewhere. From the fireplace came a low, shifting sound, like bricks settling under pressure. The second ledger's pages were still turning by themselves, slower now, stopping and starting as if searching for the right place. I grabbed it with my free hand and snapped it shut. The room reacted instantly. The lamp in the corner burst, not with a dramatic explosion, just a sharp pop and a rain of dead glass into the shade. Elise flinched. "Good," I said. "You don't get to have her." The answer came from the fireplace, from the room, from the air itself wearing our mother's voice like a pressed coat. I already did. That hit harder than it should have because it was partly true. Not possession, not the cheap version. Management, shaping. Years of small responses, years of rules without reasons. Years of fear trained into habit until the door no longer needed to force itself. I took Elise by the shoulders. This time she resisted, not violently, just with a strange, rooted steadiness, as if the floor had become more interested in keeping her than I was. Elise listened to me. Her eyes moved to mine. For a second, I saw panic there, deep down, trapped, like someone behind thick glass. "I can't shut it," she whispered. That was her. That was really her. "What do you mean?" Her mouth trembled once, then steadied against her will. "It's not outside," she said. "It's through." The front door figure spoke again, louder now. "The threshold is active." I wanted to kill everyone involved, living or dead. Instead, I said, "How do we stop it?" Elise blinked once, the first blink in too long, and tears sprang into her eyes from the effort of being present. "I don't know." Then her head turned sharply toward the hall. Not by choice. Something was moving there. I heard it a second later, the soft drag of my bag across the floorboards. I looked. The bag containing the first ledger was sliding by itself down the hallway toward the little sitting room. Not fast, not theatrical, just a steady pull, as if someone out of sight had hooked it and was drawing it in. No. I lunged, caught the strap, and nearly lost my footing. The pull on the other end was real, not strong enough to yank it from me outright. Strong enough to make my shoulder jolt. I hauled it back into the room and kicked the door with my heel. It swung inward another inch instead of shutting. Of course it did. The room wanted both ledgers together. That was the mechanism. First account, second account. Carried may now be balanced. I dropped the bag beside the table and backed away from it immediately. The temperature fell another notch. Elise gasped. The air between her and the fireplace had changed. No, not the air. The light. It bent wrong there, subtly, like heat haze in reverse. A vertical thinning, no wider than a man's shoulders, stretching from hearth to ceiling. Not visible all at once, only when you looked slightly beside it. A seam. Door was the wrong word. Too solid. Too architectural. This was a passage made out of agreement. I understood then what threshold meant. Not just someone who opens. Someone who makes the crossing possible by being recognizable from both sides. "Elise," I said, and my voice came out rougher than I intended. "Do not step toward the fireplace." She gave a tiny, broken laugh. "I'm trying not to." The thing in our mother's voice said, "She won't have to." The seam in the air darkened. Behind it, or through it, I saw movement. Not clear figures. Not yet. Depth. Water-dark distance. The suggestion of upright forms standing where no room should continue. A sense of many people waiting without impatience. Witnesses, collectors. The accounted-for dead. And something else behind them. Further back, not moving at all. Watching. The front door figure knocked then. Once. Not asking entry, marking time. The seam flickered wider. Elise made a choking sound and bent forward, one hand to her chest. "What is it?" "It's using my breath." That was enough for me. I shoved the blue file at her. "Hold this?" She took it automatically. Then I grabbed the church candle from the shelf by the fireplace, the box of matches beside it, and struck one. My hand shook. The first match died. The second caught. The little flame looked absurd in that room. Too small. Too human. Good. I touched it to the corner of the blue file. Elise jerked. "What are you doing?" "Following instructions." The paper blackened, then caught with a dry orange flare despite the damp. At once the room screamed. Not loudly. Worse. A sound like breath dragged through flooded lungs, multiplied, layered, forced through a narrow space until it became almost words. Elise doubled over. The seam in the air wavered violently. The second ledger slammed open again. Pages whipped, loose papers lifted from the table and spun once around the room like trapped birds. From the front door, the figure said, for the first time with force in its voice, "Do not destroy the record." And from the fireplace, the woman's voice answered, suddenly furious. She was never meant to keep it. The file burned faster than paper that wet should burn. Flames ran along the edges, eating dates, notes, instructions, years of our mother's management in bright, quick lines. Elise cried out and dropped it to the hearth. The moment it landed, the seam narrowed. Not closed, narrowed. Useful. I kicked the burning file fully into the fireplace. The wet brick hissed. Steam burst out in a hot, foul breath that smelled of river mud and old coins. Then the thing behind our mother's voice changed tactics. Of course it did. Nell, it said, not as Mum, as David. And my whole body went cold for a completely different reason. Nell, David's voice said again from the fireplace, low and tired and horribly exact, don't do this. I shut my eyes for 1 second. That was all it needed to prove its point. When I opened them, the seam had widened again by ½ an inch. Elise, I said through my teeth, it's going to start using whoever works. She was on her knees now, one hand braced on the floor, breathing hard but breathing as herself. I noticed. Can you move? Can you ask me something less ambitious? Fair. I crouched beside her and took her face in both hands, forcing her to look at me. Listen carefully. If it speaks in my voice, you do not answer. If it speaks in Mum's voice, you do not answer. If it speaks in your own voice... Her eyes widened. Yes, I said, especially then. The front door figure knocked again. Once. The sound travelled through the whole house. The hall mirror cracked from top corner to centre with a sharp, snapping line. The seam by the fireplace shivered. And in that shiver, for 1 clear second, I saw what lay on the other side. Not hell. Not some grand supernatural kingdom. Nothing so theatrical. A place of holding. Dark water below black timber. Ledger shelves. Narrow walkways. Names spoken softly and written down. The dead waiting in ordered ranks. Not suffering, not resting. Simply kept. Recorded. Behind them stood the sailors. And behind the sailors, far back where the dark thickened, stood a taller figure with no face I could make out, and one hand resting on what looked like a lectern or counting stand. Not Rook, the one Rook worked for. The keeper. The seam snapped thin again before I could see more. But I had seen enough. The room was not haunted in the usual sense. It was connected. And our mother had spent years keeping that connection narrow, manageable, survivable. Elise, I said. She looked up at me, grey-faced, shaking, furious. What now? I looked at the fireplace, the ledgers, the cracked mirror in the hall, the front door with something exact waiting beyond it, the seam still breathing in the air like a wound trying to remember how to stay open. Then I looked at the second ledger. We find out what she did to hold it shut, I said, and behind us, from somewhere inside the house that was not any room built by human hands, someone knocked 3 times. The 3 knocks did not come from the front door. They did not come from the little sitting room either. They came through the house itself, from the walls, the floorboards, the old pipework, the hollow places behind plaster where dust and dead air had been sitting undisturbed for years. 3 measured impacts moving through timber and brick as if the whole building had briefly become an instrument for something patient enough to wait generations. Elise flinched so hard her shoulder hit my knee. I stayed where I was beside her on the floor, not because I was calm, because movement had started to feel expensive. The seam by the fireplace held, narrow and dark, a vertical wrongness in the room. The 2 ledgers sat within a few feet of each other now, the first in my bag on the floor, the second on the table. And the air between them had the charged stillness of a storm deciding whether to break. From the front of the house, the figure at the door said, "The account is present." The woman in our mother's voice answered at once, and not yet surrendered. The word mattered. Surrendered, not opened, not broken, not invited, surrendered. I looked at the second ledger, then the first, then the fireplace. Our mother had not been fighting this thing by force. She had been managing terms that was her all over. She would rather negotiate with horror than admit fear in front of it. "Elise," I said quietly, "can you stand?" "No." "Useful answer, try anyway." She gave me a look full of exhausted hatred and put one hand on the chair leg. I hauled her up the rest of the way. She swayed once, then steadied, one hand pressed hard to her ribs, as if her breathing still belonged to someone else and she was trying to win it back. I moved to the table and pulled the second ledger toward me. The cover resisted. Not physically, more like reluctance, the faint, sticky drag of something that did not want to be read under pressure. "Come on," I muttered. "Elise," the thing in our mother's voice said softly, "you know this room. You know how to answer." "Shut up," Elise said. "Good." Anger again. Better than fear, better than obedience. I opened the ledger. The pages riffled under my hand, then settled halfway through on a section marked, not with dates, but tabs. Our mother's doing. Of course. Even the supernatural got indexed in this house. The first tab read, "Holding Methods." I almost laughed. Of course it did. I turned to it. Short entries. Practical. No drama. No explanation beyond what was necessary. Our mother had written as if she were leaving notes on boiler pressure or preserving jam. Do not allow both books to rest open in the same room after dusk. If the threshold begins to answer, interrupt with pain, heat, or naming. Mirrors widen response, cover them first. Water indicates pressure, not victory. If the seam forms at the grate, reduce one record before it can balance against the other. Reduce one record. Burn the blue file. Not random, not symbolic. Administrative sabotage. I kept reading. If a collector presents at the front door, do not admit him. He cannot cross without consent unless the threshold is fully turned. If he speaks to the witness directly, he is testing sequence. Delay him. If the room uses my voice, do not argue with what sounds like me. It is listening for recognition, not belief. That explained more than I liked. "Elise," I said, eyes still on the page, "cover the hall mirror." "With what?" "Anything." She looked wildly around the room, snatched the dust sheet off the little sofa, and stumbled into the hall. A second later, I heard fabric slap over glass. The pressure in the room eased at once, not gone, reduced. "Useful." The front door figure spoke again, sharper now. "You are interfering with process." "Yes," I said. "That is not your role." I turned a page. "No," I said. "It's my hobby." Elise made a weak, involuntary laugh from the hall. "Good. Keep her human." The next tab read, "If both daughters return to the house." I stopped breathing for a second. Of course she had planned for that too. I read, "Do not let them stand in line with door, grate, and mirror. The elder will try to understand. The younger will try to refuse. Both instincts are dangerous if separated. If the account has turned by the time they come, the witness must read aloud and the threshold must deny entry by name. If either fails, close the room and leave before full dark. If both fail, the house is no longer the house." I read that last line twice, then a third time. Elise came back into the doorway, pale and breathing hard. "What?" I looked up. "Mum left instructions for us." That sentence is becoming less comforting every time you say it. She expected this. "I know." "No," I said. "Properly. She expected this exact configuration." That landed. The thing in our mother's voice gave a soft, amused sigh from near the fireplace. She always was thorough. I ignored it. "Elise, listen to me carefully. I need you in the hall. Not in the room, not in the passage, in the hall doorway. You need line of sight to the grate, but not to the mirror." She stared at me. "Why?" "Because Mum says so." That got the first proper flash of temper I'd seen from her since the file. "Oh, brilliant, excellent, lovely. The dead mother who kept records on my breathing habits is now giving stage directions." "Yes. You hear how insane that is? All the time." She swore at me, at the room, at the family generally, then took her place in the hall doorway. Good enough. I found the next line. The witness must read aloud. Fine. I cleared my throat and started. Collector cannot complete balance while one account remains reduced and threshold denies recognition. The room reacted immediately. The seam by the fireplace shuddered. The second ledger tried to close under my hand. I held it open. The front door figure knocked once, hard enough this time to rattle the letterbox. And the thing in our mother's voice said with real anger now, "Don't read that," which was all the encouragement I needed. I read louder. Collector cannot complete balance while one account remains reduced and threshold denies recognition by true office. Elise, the front door figure called, suddenly using her voice perfectly. Let me in. She flinched. I looked up sharply. Elise, her face had gone white. That's me. I know. It came again from the front door in her own voice this time, frightened and pleading. Elise, please, I'm outside. That was clever. Not because it was convincing, because it was intimate. The self used as bait, a threshold hearing itself from the wrong side. She pressed both hands over her ears. I read louder. Denies recognition by true office, use no courtesy title, use no family name, name function only. The thing in our mother's shape changed again. This time it dropped her voice entirely. What came out of the fireplace was older, drier, not male or female in any useful sense. A voice like paper handled too often. Witness, it said, you are reading from a temporary measure. I kept reading. Threshold must refuse the collector 3 times if sequence has begun. Elise, the paper-dry voice said, if you do not answer, it will take him instead. I stopped, and that was the first mistake, not because of the voice, but because of the pronoun. Him. There was only one him in my life that sentence could be aimed at with any force. David. Of course it had gone there. Of course it had found the shape of the one person Elise knew could still move me off principle and into panic. I did not look at her. I did not need to. I could feel her looking at me. The room waited. The front door figure said nothing now. It didn't need to. I went back to the ledger and forced my voice steady. Threshold must refuse the collector 3 times if sequence has begun. Then I looked at Elise. Say it. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. The paper-dry voice from the fireplace said almost kindly, You see? She was always softer in the hinge. Elise, I said. She was shaking again. Not with cold this time, with effort, with fury, with the old family training to be polite to what frightened you if it sounded like it belonged in the house. Say it. The front door figure knocked once. From outside, in David's voice, it said, Nell. I nearly lost the line of the room right there. Nearly. Then I remembered what our mother had written. It is listening for recognition, not belief. That was the whole mechanism, wasn't it? Not truth, not consent in the modern sense. Recognition. Response. The old ugly magic of being known and answering anyway. Elise, I said, and this time I put everything I had into her name. Not command, not warning, naming, sister to sister. Say it to the collector, not to the voice. She looked at me, really looked. For 1 second I saw the child she had been, the woman she had become, and the years between them where nobody had explained a thing. Then she turned toward the front of the house and shouted, No entry! The house shuddered. The seam narrowed. The front door figure struck the wood once with its palm. Hard. I said, Again. The paper-dry voice hissed from the fireplace. Careful. Elise shouted louder this time, No entry! The hallway light blew. Glass popped somewhere in the living room. The second ledger bucked under my hand like a live thing. I said, Again. The front door voice changed. Not David now, our mother. Elise, it said from the other side of the front door, weary and disappointed. Don't be difficult. Elise made a sound that was half sob, half laugh. Then she screamed with every year of buried rage finally finding a use. No entry. Everything happened at once. The front door slammed outward so hard the chains snapped against the frame. The seam at the fireplace collapsed to a thread. The wet on the bricks flashed white with steam. And from somewhere beyond the seam, deeper than the sailors, deeper than the shelves, deeper than the ordered dark, something spoke for the first time, not loudly. It did not need to be. One sentence in a voice so controlled, it made every other voice in the house sound amateur. Account deferred is not account forgiven. The words went through the room like a blade through cloth. The ledgers both fell still. The cold remained, but the active pressure dropped away, as if the thing behind it had stepped back rather than been defeated. Not gone. Never mistake pause for absence. Stepped back. On the page before me, a final note had appeared at the bottom margin in our mother's handwriting. Or perhaps had always been there and chosen its moment. If it speaks itself, leave the house. It has seen you clearly. I shut the ledger at once. Elise. She was already moving. Good girl. I grabbed the first ledger from the bag, the second from the table, the letter, the remaining papers, anything that looked like record, and shoved them into the bag without dignity. Elise was at the front door, fumbling with the latch, breathing like she had run miles. I reached her just as the smell changed again. Less river now, more ash, more old paper. Behind us, from the little sitting room, came the soft sound of pages turning, though both ledgers were in my hand. Then our mother's voice. Not the dry one, not the mimic, but the nearest thing yet to her actual self, said quietly, "Don't leave the red box." I stopped. Elise grabbed my coat. "No, there's something else." "No." She said, I know what she said. She also said not to answer things, and look where that got us. Fair, but then I saw it. Under the little table in the hall, half hidden in shadow, a small red tin box I had not noticed before. Old biscuit tin size. Scratched lid. No label. Of course there was a red box. Of course she had waited until the exit to mention it. I swore, lunged, snatched it up and ran for the door. We got outside into the flat grey afternoon just as something hit the inside of the front door behind us. Not a body, not a hand, a pressure. Enough to bow the wood once and make the letterbox clap. Elise slammed the door shut. I locked it by instinct, though I knew locks were not the point. We stood on the step, both bent over, both breathing hard, the bag cutting into my shoulder, the red box in my hand. The house behind us looked exactly as it had when we arrived. Curtains still, green door, small front path, nothing at the windows. Ordinary. Liar. Elise straightened first. "Tell me," she said, voice shaking with fury, "that we are not going back in there today." "We are not going back in there today." Good. A beat. "What's the red box?" I looked down at it. The lid had shifted slightly in my grip. Inside, I could hear something small slide once against metal. Paper clips, maybe. Keys, or something worse. I looked back at the house, at the upstairs frosted pane that always looked lit when it wasn't, at the bay window, at the hidden room where our mother had spent years holding a door narrow enough for us to survive childhood. Then I looked at Elise. "We've got what she used to manage it," I said. "And?" I tightened my grip on the box. "And now we need to find out why she thought this was more important than telling us the truth." As we walked back to the car, something moved behind the upstairs bathroom glass. Not a face, just the shape of someone standing where no one should have been, watching us leave.